Good afternoon. Welcome to Viaja Together, spirited by AJU. As we're inviting everybody into the room and opening the doors, I want to encourage you to put in the Q&A your name and where you're from. We want to welcome you and make a very large community a very small community. So come on in, put your name in the Q&A, introduce yourself and where you're from. Just so you know, we have over 17 countries participating on a regular basis, from South Africa to Australia to England, and over 33 states. And this week, we will be well over 25,000 people who have registered for our 80 events. So I'm delighted if it is your first time, and I'm delighted if you continue to come back. So as we let everybody join, it's nice to see our friends from Georgia and our friends close to home. We're in for a spectacular morning. Lori, I'm so happy you're here, and I can't wait for our conversation. San Francisco, West LA. So nice to see some of you. It's so nice to see some of the returning faces, and it's so nice to see some new faces. Lori, I am so delighted to actually have this time with you, because you've become a worldwide phenomenon, and every author, writer, therapist, rabbi is in awe of what you've done. So I am so excited to spend the next 45 minutes with you and to get a chance to talk up close and personal about not only your book, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but also about this moment and why it is adding new challenges, and you as a therapist, what it means to you. So with that, as people are still entering, I just want to again welcome you to Viaja Together, spirited by American Jewish University. For those of you that are not aware, I am Rabbi Sherry Hirsch, the Chief Innovation Officer at our little gem on Mulholland and our campus at Simi Valley. You may have interacted with us, and you may have never known whether you've participated in the Moss Center for Jewish Journeys, the Miller Introduction to Judaism, Camp Alanim, Brandeis Bardeen Institute, or attended one of our business school, undergrad, or rabbinical schools. You may have come face to face with us. If you haven't, I encourage you to go to aju.edu. I am delighted this morning to welcome our special guest, author, therapist, previously development executive in Hollywood, but we'll come back to that later, Lori Gottlieb. Thank you so much for being here, Lori.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So before we even get into the questions, I just want to say a word about you. Everybody tends to read bios, and I'm not a big believer in reading bios. I'm a big believer in really sharing a story. And you have so many stories to share, but I love what you say in almost every interview that I've seen, is that what makes you who you are is that you're a card-carrying member of the human race. And everybody has a bio that lists all of the things they do. And by the way, you have a weekly column in The Atlantic. If you don't read it, you should be reading it every week. You have a New York Times bestseller. I have the book. Maybe you should talk to someone. I've read it twice now. You can't even see it with my background, but I'll show you in a second. It was on the bestseller list, not to embarrass you, but how many weeks and still going?
It's been over a year.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Oprah picked it as the best nonfiction book of 2019, and Eva Longoria optioned it to make it into a television show. So I don't think that's the worst thing to have Eva Longoria play you, or I'm not sure if she's the lead. Aside from all those accomplishments, what I love in everything that you say is that you are a card-carrying member of the human race. And we are just delighted to have you, because I think that's what we all are, just trying to muddle through this. So let's dig in right away. First and foremost, therapists are busier than ever. I understand that therapists can't get off Zoom from morning till night. Tell me, do you think that your book and the conversations around it have helped people feel a sense of ease of going to therapy in this moment? And do you think the relationship between the therapist and the patient has changed in this moment because of the Zoom?
Yeah. Well, that's such a great question, because obviously I wrote the book not knowing that there was going to be a global pandemic, a year after it came out. And what I've been finding is that so many people who maybe didn't know what therapy was, are reaching out to talk to somebody. And one of the things that I think the book does is it shows people what therapy really is and also what it isn't. And maybe just for some context, the book follows the lives of 4 seemingly very different patients as they go through their respective struggles. And then there's a 5th patient in the book, yours truly. And as I go through my own therapy when I'm struggling with something. And so I think that, what it does is it takes away those misconceptions about what therapy is. I think we have these misconceptions. Like, one of them is that you go to therapy, you talk about your childhood ad nauseum, and you never leave, right?
Mm.
Sort of like the old Woody Allen version of therapy or something.
Right. You're neurotic, you're crazy.
Right.
You need to be fixed because something is broken.
Right. And it's navel gazing, that's the idea. Is like, why do you need to, it's self-absorbed, it's selfish, it's navel gazing. You don't really have problems. Right. And I think that the other version of therapy is that you go to therapy every week, you download the problem of the week. You never think about your therapy during the week. You come back, you just download. It's like venting to a friend. That's not what therapy is either. Therapy is this very rich, deep human experience. And it's about a relationship between a therapist and a patient that serves as a microcosm for the relationships out there. And when you actually look inside without shame, without judgment, I talk in the book about the difference between idiot compassion and wise compassion.
I love
And
that.
Idiot compassion is what we do with our friends. So often our friends will say, this is what happened, and isn't it awful? And we'll say, yeah, that's awful. You were right. They were wrong, right? That's what we do to, supposedly support our friends. But it doesn't really help, because a lot of the times what our friends are telling us, if we know our friends really well, we sort of start to hear, oh, maybe that's happened in their last 3 relationships, or maybe that's always happening with their partner, or maybe that happens a lot with them at work, and that's why they're stuck. But we don't say that, right? It's not, we don't say to them, if a fight breaks out in every bar you're going to, maybe it's you. That's what we should say, but we don't, in a nicer way. But,
right. And we also don't go to the friends that would say that. We always go to the friends that will confirm our biases, right?
yes.
Like, ideally, you want to go to the friend that's like, what are you doing? Don't go to that bar. Right.
Yes.
But we don't go to those
exactly.
friends. It's not human nature.
We don't. We're gunning the way we tell a story. I just did a TED talk about this too, which is about the ways that we are all unreliable narrators, and that the stories that we tell are often faulty narratives because we're gunning for people to hear the story in a particular way. We're not even aware that we're doing that. So it's kind of like, what do we emphasize or minimize when we tell the story? What are we leaving in? What are we leaving out? How do we want people to hear the story? And usually it's in a way that is going to make us appear to be a certain way, but maybe that's not the most helpful version of the story. And so instead of the idiot compassion that we get out there, what therapy does is you get wise compassion. And what that means is that a therapist will hold up a mirror to you and help you to see yourself in a way that maybe you haven't been willing or able to do. And I use the word compassion with it, right? There's idiot compassion and wise compassion, because it's done in a way to say, this is really exciting. You're going to learn something about yourself, to see your own role in what's not working. And what's so empowering about knowing that you have a role in your struggles is that you can actually do something about it. So you can't change other people, but you can change what you're doing. And I'm not saying that there aren't difficult circumstances, obviously, in the world we live in, and certainly difficult people. I remember when I was training, one of my supervisors said, before diagnosing someone with depression, make sure they aren't surrounded by assholes. Right? So there are difficult people out there, but what is your response to those people? What is your role in perpetuating the difficulty that you're experiencing with that person? And once you realize that you do have a role, it frees you up to make choices. It gives you agency.
Well, and I love that you say that, because I think the idea of studying Torah is about giving you agency, right? That it makes sense that a lot of Jews joke that we all go to therapy, right? That it's sort of the alignment between Jews and therapists, because the idea of study is to not just study just for the sake of it, which is a big part of it, but it's also to fundamentally change, to look at how you respond differently to things. So tell me how the therapist-patient relationship has changed in specifically this moment.
Well, in this moment, it's interesting because all of the sessions are done on, the equivalent of Zoom. It's a clinical platform. And it's been really interesting because, first of all, a few things are happening that are unique. One is that we're all responding to the same external stressor, therapists and patients. We all have the same external stressor for the first time. And even though everybody has their own unique reaction to it, there is this kind of leveling that's going on, right? Where we're all
Right.
struggling with something at the very same time. And I would say the other part of the leveling is that, all of the kind of the accoutrements of the job, right? The office, the whole setup, the professional clothing, all of that. There's none of that anymore. And in the beginning, when I started doing these, I would like put on a nice blouse and then I'd have like sweatpants on the bottom that nobody could see. And
right.
then it
We
was
talk
like,
about business on the top and party on the bottom, right? That's the language.
exactly. But it was kind of like, I tried to make it look like an office, right? And then at a certain point, it was kind of like, who are we kidding here? Like, this is my home. And, so now, I don't, I just wear what I'm wearing. I don't really sort of put on the clothes that I would put on to go to the office in. And I think the other thing that's happened is, on the one hand, when in the book, I say that a colleague said that doing therapy was like doing therapy with a condom on, because there is nothing that can replace the intimacy of sitting face to face in a quiet room with somebody for 50 minutes straight with no distractions. There's just nothing that can replace the energy in the room, hearing the other person breathe, just the shared experience of the space is very different. And it's very hard to make contact with people in the same way when it's mediated by a screen. But one of the silver linings of doing therapy via screen is that, well, first of all, people are trying to find privacy because they're often with other people, whether it's roommates or family members in their homes, and they want to have a private space to talk. And so where do they do that? Well, maybe they go in a closet or maybe they go in their car. Most often it's in their bathroom and they're sitting on a toilet seat with the lid down. And it's really interesting to see inside people's homes, their bedrooms, their bathrooms. And these spontaneous things happen. Like one woman was talking about her mother was in an assisted living facility and there was a confirmed case of COVID, and she was very worried that her mother was going to get the coronavirus and going to die. And she was sobbing. She felt very helpless. And by accident, she leaned back and she flushed the toilet with her elbow accidentally. And it was this very, it was just this whooshing sound just filled the space between us. And I didn't want to smile or laugh, even though it was funny. Because what she was talking about was so serious. And she said to me, am I the only person who does therapy from, the toilet? And I said, no, the toilet has become the new couch. And I immediately regretted saying that in that moment, but she laughed. And we laughed together and we had this beautiful moment. At the end of the session, she said to me, this was so helpful talking to you today, but what was most helpful was when we laughed together. And she said, it reminded me of who I was before all of this started, before the coronavirus started, and who I still am. And I think that for all the ways that the coronavirus has stripped us of the things that maybe feel like they make us the most human, we haven't lost everything that makes us human. We haven't lost the ability to laugh, to feel joy, to connect in those ways. And so it was a reminder of that. And I think the other thing that doing therapy online has done is it's shown me things that I may have seen people for a long time and feel like I know them really well. But one person, for example, had this cello in the background. And I said, whose cello is that? And she said, it's mine. And I play it every day for hours. And I had no idea.
Wow. Well, I think it's also very interesting. Like, you're getting a glimpse into our lives, the therapist, but also we're getting a glimpse into the therapist's life and how, right. And part of me is like, do I really want to see that? Do I want to see his kid screaming and him getting frustrated? Or do I really want to see her being like, and I think it really taps into what you talked about in the book is like, what does my therapist think of me? But I wonder now if therapists are like, what does my clients, what did they think of me? Because now we're seeing into them in a way that we never did.
Right. Well, I think if anything, I think therapists are feeling very revealed. I remember there's this scene in the book where I'm treating this young woman who ends up with a diagnosis of cancer, and she's working at Trader Joe's, and I end up at Trader Joe's with my son, and I didn't know that she was going to be working there at that Trader Joe's at that time. And I don't want to go in her line, right? Because I want to give her privacy. But really, as I realized when she calls me into her line and wants me there, I feel very exposed, like, oh, she's looking at the food that we eat. She's looking at like these things that are very private. She's looking at my child. I've never mentioned my child. And so, I think if anything, people who see us have already exposed themselves to
Right.
us, but we
You've
haven't
peeled back.
exposed.
Yes, you've
Right.
peeled back the curtain. And I wonder, I thought about it on two levels. One is that in this moment, therapists have really had to peel back the curtain. I mean, I see it in my own life, but also your book peeled back the curtain on therapists. And I
Yeah.
wondered how other therapists responded, because I laughed out loud through your book and I cried and I did what like the billions of people that have read it. But I think one of the things that I thought about was, how do other therapists feel about giving away the trade secrets? How do they feel about what you've written and sort of peeling back what's behind the curtain? It's not the great Oz. It's just a card carrying member of the human race.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the whole point of the book, is that we aren't wizards, right? And we aren't holding secrets. We're having a really authentic relationship with our patients. And so I think if they think that we have like a bag of tricks, or that we're somehow manipulating a situation, that's a very different kind of work that they'll be doing than if they feel like, wow, I'm really in the moment responding to this person on a very human level. And so we want to take away this idea that we have this bag of tricks, or that we're hiding something, or that even that we know more, right?
I just
And I think,
love that, because I think it's very relatable for anybody in a service profession that's sort of always drawing those boundaries.
well, right. And I think so there are boundaries. So that, there's certainly boundaries. But I think, and we're very much being strategic, right? But I also think, there's this word that I have taped up in my office, ultracrepidarianism. And it means the habit of giving advice or opinions outside of one's knowledge or competence. And I have it up in my office because it reminds me that so many times people will come to therapy and that they expect you to tell them what to do. Here's my situation. What should I do? And I might know what I would do in that situation, but that's my life and I'm not living their life for them. So it's really about helping people to figure out how can they make those choices for themselves. I can't presume to know what they should do because I'm not living their life.
Well, and it's very interesting because there's crossover between being a rabbi and being a therapist. And I often hear myself saying as a rabbi, actually, I need to refer you to a therapist. That's not what I do. Right.
Mm,
And I think it's really important that those lines and boundaries are there. But I just wanted to touch one thing. There's a revealing of the curtain, but I also think there's privacy and there's secrecy. And can you talk a little bit about the difference? Because I think we're now being exposed to some things that are private, but we're also being exposed to some things that may have been secret.
yeah. So that's a really important distinction. And I think about secrets as being something that feels shameful.
Mm.
Carl Jung called secrets psychic poison, right? We all know if there's a family secret, it comes out somehow, or kids suspect it, even if they don't know what the secret is. There's something in the air, there's a vibe around a secret that feels dangerous, right? And there's some shame, and there's a reason that you have to hide. Privacy is not that at all. Privacy is, we all need private spaces. We all need something that is just ours, and it's something positive. There's no shame around it. It's just simply, it belongs to us, and that feels good. That's very different from, if I reveal this, somebody will judge me, think differently of me. Pandora's box will be opened.
But I think it's interesting to watch people find themselves revealing things unexpectedly that they thought were secret, but actually were just private. And to see that they don't get judged for it. I see that a lot. People said to me, oh, do you see that this happens? And it's like, okay, right? That there's somehow that we walk around thinking these things are secret, but maybe they're just private, and sharing them, that we won't be judged for them.
Right. And also, you don't have to share everything. I think that there's, what is the purpose in sharing something? So while, the title of the book, maybe you should talk to someone, doesn't necessarily mean you should talk to a therapist. It means we should all talk more to one another, but that doesn't mean TMI. That doesn't mean, I see so often, I'll see something on like Instagram, right? Where someone will say, I've never shared this with anyone before, but I'm going to share it with all of you. And I'm being so vulnerable. And then people will like comment, that was so amazing. You're so brave. That was so vulnerable. And to a point, but I also think that real vulnerability is when the stakes are high. Real vulnerability is sitting face to face with someone you're actually in relationship with in real life, who matters to you, and you feel like you're taking off the mask and you're taking a risk. That's real vulnerability. And so I feel like what people get out of the book is that they're reading about things that are private, right? But they're being shared in the context of these therapy sessions. And people can see themselves in these stories and they say, wait a minute, maybe the world won't end if I share this with the person who matters most to me. Maybe it will be important for our relationship if I'm not hiding in plain sight so much. And I think that's the beauty of human relationships, right? Is when you can be vulnerable in a way when it matters. And so I think that
you're very Jewish, you know that. Like that's like, well, Buber says that we experience God in those moments, right?
Oh
like
no, I didn't know that.
Oh my God, we need to study this. But in those moments of connection, in those unspoken moments, when you really unveil the mask and show your true vulnerability, not your I'm being so courageous, I'm, dumping this in front of an anonymous audience. But when you really show your true vulnerability is when we experience moments of holiness, or what we would call God. So that's a very Jewish idea.
And what we call in therapy connection, right? So that's what it means to truly connect with somebody. And
I want to pivot for a second. There's so much to talk to you about. I know everybody, and you think you'd think that you've done interviews and things that but you just continue to be this wealth of wisdom, and we so appreciate it. That's why over 550 people registered for this today. I want to talk about these fractured relationships between adult children and their parents, which a lot is being written about. Parents and adult children are struggling. Granted, parents and teenagers are struggling, parents and small children are struggling, but there's this particular category of parents and their adult children. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you think that's happening and how we ameliorate the situation?
Yeah, wow, there's so much to say about that. I should say I recently wrote, somebody wrote in to the Dear Therapist column that I write in the Atlantic about this exact question. They had an estranged adult child. And so I would suggest reading that as well.
I was gonna say, I read it, it's great.
Oh, good. Okay. And in fact, this week's column is coming out on Monday, is from the child's point of view. So, with wanting to estrange himself from his father and his new wife. So, I think that what's happening is that, I think that parents of this generation grew up thinking that their kids were almost like, they needed their kids to like them. They needed their kids to like them as a peer, as opposed to love them as in the hierarchy of parent and child. And I think that the kids feel very entitled to having their needs met in a certain way. And so when the parents don't do that, when the parents were fallible, as most parents are, and some parents make significant mistakes, as when their kids are growing up, it's hard to really know. I think that the parents don't really know how to talk to the kids about it, and the kids don't really know how to talk to the parents about it. And what happens is the kids say, you disappointed me, you hurt me, and I don't want to have anything to do with you. Right? That it's they've gotten this message that, like, the healthy thing to do is to distance myself from something that causes me discomfort. And you, mom or dad, cause me discomfort, so I'm going to have no contact with you. That's sort of the message that they get, right? Anything that causes me discomfort, I am going to stay away from. They didn't get the message growing up that when something causes you discomfort, that's a real opportunity for growth. That was not the message that we have been sending our kids.
No, we did not get that message. We were taught to run from discomfort, not to not to use it as a moment of spiritual growth.
Right. And so even with our kids, when you think about, like, with little kids, when they come to their parents, I see this so much with people where we try to talk our kids out of their feelings so that we can protect them from discomfort and protect us from our own discomfort because they have discomfort. So they might say, like, your kid might say, oh, I'm so sad about this. And the parent will say, like, oh, don't be sad. Hey, let's go get some ice cream, or they'll be like,
what do you say to right now to people that are feeling so many emotions, so much discomfort? They're annoyed that their parents aren't behaving the way that they want. And not only feeling that over the course of a week, sometimes in the middle of an hour, they feel 1,600 emotions, including stress and anger and resentment. What do you say to people? What do you do in that moment?
I say with younger kids, you know, when they're telling you about something that makes you uncomfortable, about something that they're feeling anxious, they're feeling angry, they're feeling sad, whatever they're feeling, 3 words are really helpful. Tell me more.
Hmm.
That's all you need to say. Oh, tell me more. Let them talk. Don't defend yourself. Don't defend, you know, don't try to fix it. Don't give them the solution. Just listen. We don't know how to listen. I would say with adults, going back to the estrangement issue, it is really important to hear what your kids have to say, your adult kids have to say, even if you don't agree with their version of events. That this isn't about, you know, what is reality, right? Because everybody is going to have a different version, and each version is equally valid. And so, you know, we're not videotaping the events and saying what objectively happened here. We're saying this was your child's perspective and this was your perspective. And it's really important for you to be able to see yourself through their eyes, even if you see the situation differently. And that's
I
nothing will
know
move forward
I know
if
we'll
you
get
don't start
pushback
there.
though, because the idea of seeing each other through each other's perspective is fine in a therapeutic sense and a relationship sense, but there's an issue of safety here, right? I hear adult children saying like, my parents want to go out and eat at a restaurant every night, and I'm telling them it's not safe. Like how, it's like, I can't see their perspective. So what do you say to that person?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the things that happens with the coronavirus and differences between parents and kids is that the kids are telling the parents what to do, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of parents don't like that. A different approach might be, hey, I really love you and I care about you. Just even starting there instead of, what are you doing? You can't go to a restaurant. You're 70 years old, right? That's not very effective. But hey, I just want to tell you something. You can do whatever you want to do, but I want to tell you something. I love you so much and I'm really scared. Talk about yourself. I'm really scared because I'm seeing what's happening. I'm happy to send you some of the, you know, some of the articles about this. So you can read it for yourself if you want to. I'll send them. You can do what you want with them. But I'm really scared because I think about how I would feel if something happens to you the way that it's happening to all of these people your age. And it was all because you decided you wanted to go to a restaurant. I have a lot of feelings about that. You know, just start there and
That's such
don't put
beautiful
them on the
advice,
defensive.
right? Because a lot of adult children are like dictating their parents' behaviors. And I have a lot of grandparents saying to me, Rabbi, tell my children that I don't work for them, right? Like that's what I have a lot of people coming to me to mediate. And I'm like, I'm not the mediator. We're going
Right.
to go to
But
go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just saying to your parents, I love you so much. And the idea of something happening to you makes me so scared. Just starting there sets a different tone for the conversation.
Right. I think starting there in almost every conversation, whether it's with our small children or adult children or our grandparents, just starting from that place of real vulnerability, what you talked about earlier, is so powerful. So we're going to open it up for questions in a moment. So feel free to put your questions in for the Q&A. I want to ask you one other question before we go to Q&A. Just a reminder, we're at Biachad Together, spirited by American Jewish University. I'm Rabbi Sherry Hirsch, along with Lori Gottlieb, talking about all things pandemic related and also how to heal from this moment. I'm interested in the long-term effects that it'll have on all of us, which none of us can predict. But I want to just pivot for 1 second. We all were living very busy lives. We were rushing around. We said, if I only had time, I would do this and this and this. Suddenly, we have this time, not in the way that we necessarily imagine. And all you hear people saying is like, I just want it to go back to normal. When will things go back to normal? Is this a case of the grass is always greener, or is this something else going on?
You know, one of the things that I think people are having trouble with right now is living in the both and of this situation. So by that, I mean, I remember back in March when my son started doing remote learning, right? So school was closed. We thought it would be like 2 weeks. Little did we know. Um, and
I had
remember,
that moment too.
right? And I remember thinking, you know, he's 14 and all of a sudden, like, there he was with me and I got to see so much more of him. We were rushing around to this activity or that activity or my work things or whatever it was, right? And we got to spend so much more time together and I was delighting in that. And so on the one hand, I think people feel guilty. They feel like we're in the middle of this global pandemic and how can we feel joy and gratitude in the middle of so much pain and suffering. And what I say to people is, this isn't the pain Olympics. This isn't the grief Olympics, right?
That's such a good word.
Are afraid to talk about, well, first of all, they're afraid to talk about any kind of loss that they're experiencing if it's not about loss of life, loss of health, or loss of job or income, right?
Do you think
They
that's
feel like
because it doesn't feel like,
it doesn't feel significant enough. It
right.
doesn't, it feels like, they're trivializing other people's experiences, and you're not. They're both real, right? And if you pretend that you aren't having these feelings, the feelings just get bigger, and then they become something bigger: depression, anxiety, insomnia, short-temperedness, whatever. So too much food, too much
just
wine,
that little list, right?
We could go on and on.
I was going to say, just name it off.
Right. But that's what happens. So if you numb out your feelings, numbness isn't the absence of feelings. Numbness is the sense of being overwhelmed by too many feelings. And that's exactly what happens when you try to numb them out. But the other piece of it is that when we experience joy, right, we feel guilty for experiencing that. Some people are saying to me very privately, I'm so glad I don't have that hour commute to work every day. I'm loving using that time differently. I can take a walk. I can be with my family, whatever it is, right?
I hear a lot from parents that their adult children came home from college and they're like, kind of like it, right? I like having sort of a taste of what was and a little bit of memory of that.
Right, right. So a lot of people feel like they're not entitled to that you can't experience joy at the same time that there's so much pain. And it's kind of like, that's the human condition right there in a nutshell, right? The joy and the pain all mashed together. And I think we need to get more used to living in that space between things, and not in the binary, well, this is a time of suffering, so we all need to just, focus on the suffering. We can have both, without feeling like, a lot of people feel like, well, I have a roof over my head and food on the table and I don't have the coronavirus, so I'm not allowed to feel anything other than, whatever I'm supposed to be feeling.
There's a beautiful,
you're feeling. And I think,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say one last piece of that is that I think that when we feel joy and when we feel whole, that allows us to be in service to others in a way that we can't when we feel broken. And so, for example, my son is doing something where, because he feels like, he has a lot of, there is a lot of, he would much rather be with his friends and much rather be out, and would have much have preferred to be in school, but also he has a lot more time on his hands. And so if he can feel the gratitude for that, he's doing this thing with the Righteous Conversations Project, where he is paired with a Holocaust survivor, because a lot of them are at the age where they can't get out and about during this time. And he's developing this beautiful relationship with this man who is probably doing more for my son than my son is doing for him, but they're pairing teens with Holocaust survivors. And so I think that when we can feel whole, we have more to give back. And that's another aspect to it.
God, it's so beautiful. I swear, I think you've been studying Judaism, because we talk about a teaching where you can hold multiple feelings. It's the reason we've been given two hands, right? That we can hold joy and guilt and hold happiness and sadness all at the same time within one soul. So I really do think someone actually asked a question that I want us to return for one moment. When you've said to your parents very lovingly and very gently, I love you, I'm concerned, and you give that really good speech, which I love, and then they go anyway to a restaurant, what do you say to them that you're not in tacit agreement, but you acknowledge that they made the right choice? How do you deal with that internally within yourself, and also just in general? What do you say to your parents?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not necessarily one conversation. So it's an ongoing dialogue. And I want to stress the word dialogue, because it goes both ways. It's also about their point of view, and their point of view might be, I'm at this age and I don't know how much time depending on, where they are and what their health is like. I don't know how much time I have left, and this could go on for a year or more. And I want to eat at a restaurant, and that's their choice, right? You don't have to agree with it, but you can still have the dialogue with that. You can still have an ongoing dialogue where it's not a fight, where you're not backed into each other's corners. One of the things I do with couples a lot that I see in my practice, and it works well with parents and adult children too, is argue their side of it. Sometimes we get so backed into a corner because we become so rigid in our perspective that we can't see their perspective at all. And so if you can argue their side of it to yourself, all of a sudden it opens you up a little bit more to their experience, and it gives you a different way of talking with them.
Hmm.
It'll sound different. You will sound different when you talk with them. And then I would say the last piece of that is, and you have to come at some place of peace with yourself, that everyone gets to live their own life and you don't have control over their lives.
Right. And I think,
And so that's really about your anxiety and how are you going to manage your own anxiety?
well, it's interesting because there's your part and there's their part, and to really understand the difference between those two. There's something also that you said in that that I think is interesting, is that there's a sense that people are feeling tremendous loss. Like, this was the time in my life I was going to go cruising, or
Mm-hmm.
retirement. And that's an example, but also loss in many other ways. And so when someone responds like, I don't know how much time I have left, I'm not going to waste it at home staring at myself in the mirror, but I'm going to go out to eat. Is that a way that people are coping with this loss? Or is that one of the ways people are coping? Do you see?
Yeah, I think that people are coping in all kinds of ways, but I think that people are really making important decisions about their priorities. And all of us, whether you're, in some, situation where you feel like you don't have a lot of time left, I should say that one of the things it's done for all of us is make us much more aware of our mortality in a really positive way. I think that, in the book, I talk about how this woman with cancer, who's this young woman, said to me, why do people need a terminal diagnosis to really prioritize, to really understand what's important to them in their lives and to really live with intention, right? Yet we all have a terminal diagnosis. Life has 100% mortality rate, and that's not just for other people. And most of us don't know how or when we're going to die. And so I think the coronavirus has really, put a spotlight on that concept. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I had these things in my life that I'm really glad I don't have right now. And I don't need to return to them. Maybe I don't need to, put so much emotional real estate into this, that, or the other thing because I don't have it now and it's actually making me happier. And on the flip side, I think a lot of people are saying, and there are these things that I'm really seeing do matter to me and I haven't really invested in them. And I want to put more time and focus onto those things and those people.
Do you encourage people to write these priorities down now that they're becoming much more clear, or they're becoming more of a conversation in their lives?
I think there's almost like been a reckoning that people are having with themselves,
Mm-hmm.
which is about, what matters to me and what matters to the people that matter to me and what matters to my community and what matters and what is my place in the world. And these are big questions that we don't have the space to ask ourselves in the hustle and bustle of, daily life.
Well, as a rabbi, I see people ask those questions at liminal moments, right? When they've had a death or when they've gotten married, but you don't have them asking them on a regular basis. And I think what's so powerful about this moment is what we can learn about ourselves and our community and what truly matters, as you're saying. Let's pivot for 1 second because people are asking a lot of
Right. And I think,
questions. Go ahead.
yeah,
Oh,
I was just going to say, the ongoing nature of this, I think, allows us more space to ask because it wasn't like the coronavirus happened, it lasted 2 weeks, and then we went back to normal life. I think the fact that it's ongoing is forcing us, again, in a really positive way, to ask questions and to really examine what we do when we have the answers to these questions.
Yeah, I love that. I love this as a time of exploration. And rather than seeing it as a time of just building up of emotions of anxiety and nervousness, how can I use this and learn from this moment? So someone's written in that they're struggling tremendous with loneliness, and that they hear all their friends talking that, oh my God, all I want is privacy. I'm bombarded with my kids 24/7. I just want space. And it's hard to deal with the loneliness of this moment. And we know that loneliness doesn't only happen when you're by yourself. Loneliness can happen when you're in a packed house of people. What do you say to people that are experiencing loneliness, and how would you describe loneliness in this moment?
Yeah. Well, I think obviously loneliness is exacerbated by the fact that, people, we are social creatures. Even if you're more introverted, we still need to be physically in the same space as other people. And then there's also just, this phenomenon, it's called skin hunger, right? Which is a real thing. You see it with babies in orphanages when they don't get held and how they don't thrive and they don't develop in the ways that they should. You see it at any age, where in the course of a day, whether you have a partner or you don't have a partner, we get touched so much, whether it's like giving someone a hug when you greet them or giving them a kiss on the cheek or shaking hands with someone or giving them a high five, or even just the barista at Starbucks handing you your drink and your fingers touch or whatever it is. We are used to being touched. And so there's a real neurological lack when we don't get touched. So that's real. And that's something that a lot of people are suffering from right now. Just the day to day of, what happens in the course of a day and skin hunger. And then the emotional part of it, of course. And I'll tell you something from the therapy room on that, which is that so many people that I do see who are, sheltering with their families, they love them very much, but they're very sick of them. And so they will say things like, God, I wish like someone would call me, or I wish like my other friends, I'm so sick of hearing from, the people in my household. And the single people, or the people who are living alone right now, they will say, I don't want to call my friends with kids, with partners, because I don't want to burden them. They have so much on their plate. They're so busy. And just as a PSA, I want to put out there that these people are dying to hear from you. They would like nothing more than to hear from you. They really want those friendships. They want to talk to you. And so I think that a lot of people are afraid to reach out. My advice would be, please reach out to people. Please don't feel like you're a burden. Please don't feel like they don't want to hear from you. Even if you feel like you have nothing to say because you're not doing anything, they just want to connect with you. They just
And can you say, I literally have nothing to say. I just want to talk to you. I just want to be in connection. I think it can be as simple as just naming it.
Exactly. And a lot of people, what they're doing is they're going on walk and talks, which is that they'll be walking separately somewhere, right? They're going on a walk, and then their friend is going on a walk in a completely different geographic location. And they're just doing walk and talks, and they get outside and they're talking, and there's this intimacy to having that conversation as you're taking a walk. And it's just the two of you on that line with nobody else in the background.
Appropriate, right, to what you just said. We had someone write in that my mom's in her 90s. All she wants is a hug from me, and I'm terrified. And what advice do you give that person?
There's no easy answer to that. If there were an easy answer, it would just be hug her or don't hug her.
Right.
Right. That there's no easy answer. I think that what happens in that situation is that, people are making choices about who they're exposing themselves to, so that they can figure out how much they want to expose themselves to, say, their elderly parents. And, these are all personal decisions, and there's no right or wrong to it. You have to make these choices, and they're really hard choices.
Well, and each week when you write these columns and you give advice and you don't know the people, how much do you think you're expected to take this, or is it just guidance to say I want to give you the goods to know how to make the decision that's right for you? Because I'm always curious about that, the pros and cons of having sort of a blanket write-in and then a response. How much do you feel like people are going to take your advice and really hear it and heed it?
Well, it's so different from the therapy room, where you feel like if you left something out or you come up with something later, that there's next week where you can bring that back. First of all, you don't have any relationship with this person who writes in. You have no idea who they are. And so, you have to make a lot of guesses. But I think that a lot of what people write in with is so universal. And so I'm not just writing for that one letter writer who wrote in. I'm responding for all of the readers who are reading the column, because I know that they're going to see a piece of their own lives in something that I say in my response, whether they're experiencing that same situation or not. What I think is interesting is that I'm launching a new podcast next month. It's called Dear Therapists, and Katie Kirk is producing it for iHeartRadio. And it's me and Guy Winch, who people may also know from his TED Talks as well. And the unique thing about the podcast is that not only, so the listener, their dilemma, they write a letter, discuss it, and you hear how therapists think about the problem before we even talk to the person. So you get that sort of behind the scenes of how are we thinking about this and what might we say? And then you hear us present our advice to the person and have a conversation with the person. But the unique part of it is that with the advice columns that he writes, the advice column for TED, I write the advice column for The Atlantic, the reader never gets to find out what happened after we gave the advice, right? In our podcast, we actually bring them back. We hear how it went. And I think we can learn a lot from not only what worked, but what didn't work. And I think that in life, so much of the time, we feel like we have to, when we're helping someone, we have to give them the exact right answer. We have to give them the right advice. But people learn from, experiencing something, and they may try something and it doesn't work. And they're going to grow so much learning about, well, why didn't that work? What happened?
I always say that we learn because of people and in spite of people, and both learnings are as equally as important, right? And so when people are like, my parents did this, my parents did that, fabulous. You're learning all the things that maybe you don't want to do, or how you want to do it differently than they did it.
Yeah.
We're just about out of time, and I want to do a couple things. First of all, I want to say that everyone who has yet to read or order Lori's book, please read it. I mean, there's very few books that I say it like that. I keep a stack of them in my house and give them away to people as friends, as gifts, not as friends. I give them to my friends as gifts. I also love hearing about your podcast. I want to remind people to go to The Atlantic to read every week your writings, which I think are so full of joy, laughter, and all those emotions. I've laughed out loud reading your book. And actually my favorite story was about the woman who got the terminal diagnosis, because I think a lot of us could relate to that. A few final notes. I have to do a quick rapid fire question because everybody wants to know, the therapist who reveals herself wants to know, what are those details? So your favorite show you've binged on during COVID?
Oh, wow. This Is Us.
Oh, good. I have to do that one. Favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, Hanukkah.
Why?
Why? The family elements of it.
Nice. Favorite Jewish food?
Oh, latkes, easy.
Oh, easy, because it's Hanukkah and our dog's name is Latkes. What's your dream superpower?
Ooh, to be able to slow down time.
Oh, I like that one. And the best piece of advice you've ever received?
If you don't like somebody, get to know them better.
Who gave you that?
It's something that like an adage that I've heard.
Lovely. I want to thank you so much, Lori. It's such an opportunity for all of us to hear your wisdom, especially in this moment. I want to encourage everybody to go to the podcast. When's it launching?
End of July.
End of July, and Katie Couric producing. I'm sure it will be phenomenal. And to get the book, I also want to remind people that tomorrow we're looking at American Jewish food culture with the authors of Gefilteria, which is a little bit fun. But if you're enjoying this conversations about how to handle the anxiety and stress of this moment, I want to remind everybody to join us on July 8th at 10 a.m. with Gail Saltz. Have you read The Power of Difference? Lori,
Yeah, and actually I love Gail, and I did something with her in New York when we were allowed to be around humans.
I love Gail, and she's so wise. And we've had Dale Atkins and you and Gail coming up. I think it is like a trifecta of brilliance and wisdom. And I hope that you'll come back. I hope that you'll continue to learn with us. We're so grateful to have you. And we want to wish everybody that they stay well and be well. And we look forward to having you on Biachad together. Be well.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.